of French Creole descent, which also explains the accent. I have short curly hair, and I'm today wearing a long navy blue dress with yellow and red flower pattern. Clearly I didn't get the green cloth memo. I have the pleasure of representing Valuable 500 today. You've heard from our founder, Caroline. I think goes without needing to present her today. For those who don't know Valuable 500 overall, we are a global organization of 500 partners and companies, and we're working together to end disability exclusion. Not a small agenda, but like everybody else here, we are working together with organizations like yourselves. The way we do it is we drive change through what we call synchronized collective actions. So that's trying to channel the power of the 500 organizations that we work with, working in harmony, moving through in the same direction at the same time, and trying to go against the same system barriers. So all of us are working towards what we called Sync 25, our first accountability summit that will be held in Tokyo in December 2025. I have the pleasure today to be leading this panel on examining the role of leaders empowering inclusive workplaces. And I'm joined today by 4 amazing people that you will be hearing about. We have representatives from myAbility, who is also happens to be a Valuable 500 directory and Sync 25 leaders, as well as 3 representatives from Valuable 500 companies from Sanofi, Bayer, and Atos. So I'll let them introduce themselves, and if you may, and we'll start with you, Wolfgang, introduce yourself by sharing your name, your organization, your role, and a brief visual description of yourself, please.
Thank you very much, Delphine. My name is Wolfgang Kowatsch. I'm co-founder of myAbility, and I am 185 centimeters tall. I'm wearing a dark blue suit, a white shirt, and black shoes, and my hair is dark brown, and I'm having a gray 1-week beard.
Thank you very much. Iulia?
Hello, everyone. My name is Iulia. I work at Sanofi as Global Accessibility Advisor. For a short visual description of myself, I'm a white woman of Romanian origin. I wear a denim jumpsuit today with a light blue shirt. My pronouns are she, her.
Thank you very much. Ruth?
Good afternoon, everybody. Really great to be here. My name is Ruth Mathieson. And I head up global strategic marketing for one of the business units in Bayer. I actually work for their crop science division. Visual description of me, I think we've all got the memo today to all be in blue, rather than I should actually be in green because I'm actually Irish, but I did not get that memo. I'm from Northern Ireland. I am completely wearing blue. I use a wheelchair. I have a spinal cord injury from a horse riding accident.
Thank you, Ruth. Neil?
Neil Milliken, I'm the Global Head of Accessibility at Atos. We're a French-headquartered multinational IT services organization. Visual description, I'm wearing the dark blue uniform of the conference, and I'm a middle-aged white guy with close-cropped hair and close-cropped beard.
Thank you, Neil, and thank you for bringing everybody's attention that we do match the seating in today's room. So in 2024, Valuable published a white paper which defined and examined the personality traits of disability-confident leaders. And when we looked at that, we also looked at how those traits that we've identified translated into creating more inclusive practices and outcomes for their companies overall, but also for their employees and customers directly. Within this paper, you'll find which you can publicly access. We identified that despite 61% of leaders identifying stigma and discrimination, I don't think it will come as a surprise for everybody, we identified those as major barriers. But what we saw was that successful disability confidence leaders were actually driving transformation through 3 key pillars. And those were purpose and strategy, psychological safety and trust, storytelling, and accountability. So with our panelists today, we'll look at success and challenges that leaders encounter on the road to disability confidence. And I'll start by asking them a series of questions, and you'll be able to hear from them. I'll start with you, Wolfgang. And would you be able to tell us, from the organizations that you interact with, what do you hear are the common challenges that they may face?
Thank you, Delphine. Just to give a quick context, with myAbility, we work with more or less 500 mainly big companies, and we want to together create a more inclusive and accessible business world and organizations. And it's not about what these business leaders tell me, it's more what we observe, because the one thing is what people say and the other one is what they do. So I would like to focus on what we have been observing with these many projects and many years of activities, more than 10 years. And I would group it into four. Like the first field that is really relevant according to our work is lack of knowledge within the leadership teams and the responsible people in the companies. It's about not knowing enough, and as a consequence, not doing nothing, which is, in my opinion, the worst of all. It's like a dead-end street, no? So we try to motivate leaders to start, even if not everything is on the table, but at the same time, of course, try to transfer the knowledge. There's many countries with strong regulations and a lot of laws according to referring to quota or accessibility and all this, but and here it's important to give security. The second field is a lack of experience. We also observed that in organizations where there's little contact between the leadership teams and the staff, and also the employees with disabilities, there is not a lot of experience and not a lot of understanding, and as a consequence, the relevance and the importance of the topic gets down on the agenda. The third field, and maybe this is a bit underestimated and in my opinion very important, lack of processes. What do I mean with that? Being the first leader who is courageous, who is fighting for an important topic, is sometimes very difficult. Many of the leaders would love to do it, but at the end they don't dare it, or they don't have the support within the company. And I think the solution is relatively simple. If you start thinking about most important KPIs or goals that are difficult to fail, and when you have processes in place that make sure that the workforces are adapted easily without the necessary disclosure of employees and all this can help a lot. So the processes, especially in these times when the topic is discussed in a very emotional way, are crucial. And this is also another white paper that you have published and also we have published. I think this is a very important tool. And the last area, and then I'm finished, is also for me personally as an ally very important. It's about who to choose and promote as a leader. It's not about hiring and promoting the most self-confident people on the stage or most charismatic, maybe even narcissistic people that lead our companies into the future. No, in my and our opinion, it's the humble ones. It's the people who listen, the people who want to understand what is important to their employees, and at the end, it's about also, of course, result orientation. So we should not fall into this trap to go for the strongest leader. We should go for the best leaders in terms of make a huge progress also in the terms of disability confidence and accessibility.
Thank you for reminding us of that, and I will quote Caroline, who is now at the front of the stage, always reminding me of the importance of having heart and brain. I'll turn to Iulia now. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about how Sanofi is approaching all of this and how you've built your strategy to be more disability confident?
Absolutely. For those who do not know, Sanofi is a global healthcare and pharmaceutical company. We are present in about 70 countries with a footprint of 80,000 employees. So our workforce is quite vast. Accessibility and disability inclusion at Sanofi are quite tied to Sanofi's broader culture, diversity, and employee experience strategy. So basically everything we do in terms of DE&I and employee experience really eventually ladders up and builds up the company culture. We truly believe that breakthroughs in healthcare can happen when every voice is heard and when every viewpoint is welcomed. When we define our overarching accessibility and disability inclusion strategy, we really had a clear global approach. We really wanted to embed accessibility into our culture through, first and foremost, awareness, of course, but also through access to education, community, and really harnessing the power of our employee resource groups. We wanted to provide accessible products and services to our patients and customers and employees that extend across the physical and digital environment, and ultimately really embrace accessibility as a core business value. So basically, no matter where you are in the business, trying to implement or adopt accessibility practices, these outcomes should be present in some sort of shape or form. So to begin with, we really focused on key business areas. What are critical business areas where we can bake accessibility into? So we looked at our workplace experience strategy, digital and consumer experience strategy, our Sanofi branding, product design system, and even procurement practices. What we wanted to achieve with this is really ensure that each of the function within the company owns that accessibility workstream instead of isolating it and treating it as another D&I initiative. So once we had really accessibility baked into all these parts of the business, we really connected the dots and created what we call today a global accessibility standard, which is basically our unified approach to accessibility globally that really aligns with our commitment and ensures that everyone, wherever they are in the world, they're able to implement these requirements while also have the flexibility to adapt based on regional or functional legislation or other requirements that they may have locally. However, there is a baseline and a foundation for each of these offices to implement. Of course, with the global accessibility standard, we have practical and functional guidance on how to make the environments more accessible and more inclusive for our employees. But we really wanted to go beyond this practical implementation and ensure that we have authentic representation across our offices and really promote through accessibility, actually belonging and equity, ensuring that there's access to disability etiquette training or other more social practices that we are able to embed. So lastly here, I know that Wolfgang mentioned this as well, and I'm glad to hear that we're doing this, but we do have a strong leadership commitment that really supports the implementation of our strategy and global standards globally. And I'm not talking really about leadership buy-in, because I think we're way past that, but actual commitment and accountability. And of course, commitment without a structure is just a good intention, and good intentions can fall short if you don't have the how and the systems in place to keep people accountable and really reinforce inclusion.
Thank you for that. I mean, you mentioned, commitment of leaders that have helped you, and we've talked at Sanofi, and we've talked about good practices as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about the accountability piece? Because I think it's important that we have the commitment, but we move beyond and ensure that those leaders are accountable for the work that they've done and the work that they've committed to do. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Absolutely. So starting from the highest level, all our C-suite executives have an active responsibility to accelerate inclusion, basically an active role in DE&I. So half of them are executive sponsors for all our 5 global ERGs, and the other half sits in what we call our DE&I board, where we have, which also includes our CEO and 3 external advisors that part of which is also Caroline Casey, which is here in front of the room, which we're very proud of. So our DE&I board actually holds us accountable and ensure that we deliver on our global commitments. It really monitors our progress and, of course, it challenges us along the way. So we had the board since 2022, and we've been reporting on progress, particularly against accessibility and disability inclusion, to our DE&I board. But also, besides the actual reports, we intentionally invite people to the meetings to report on different accessibility, disability inclusion, or other diversity programs. So we have particular people coming in and reporting instead of having the same person always providing a global update. And what that does is actually ensures a little bit more ownership, because when you actually come in front of the, the board and also in front of our CEO and present on your progress, it's definitely solidifies that accountability and ensures that people actually deliver on their progress. So actually that ownership at the highest level, that includes our C-suite and CEO, really creates a ripple effect, also makes my job a lot easier, because having a global owner on a specific work stream will require people in their team then delivering on their projects and so on. So I think this has been very, very useful in the past years. And lastly here, I would say that our employee resource groups and our affinity groups also play a very important role in providing that direct feedback to their senior sponsors or keeping them accountable on their promises, right? We have been very intentional ensuring that all the local and the global ERGs have a specific business or executive sponsor, either regional, local, or global. And so if you think only for disability inclusion, for disability networks, we have 23 chapters. That means we have already 23 executive sponsors for those groups. And so sponsorship is obviously not the starting point, it's just the starting point, not particularly the goal. And we're always revising and ensuring that we develop our governance around the ERGs that really prepares the senior leaders and ensures that the expectations from them are also clear. So, for example, internally, we have structured opportunities for the executive sponsors to really engage with the employee resource groups and affinity groups through meetings, forums, or particular programs. But one thing that we've been doing in the past 2 years or so is really connect them with opportunities to show up externally. So for example, participating in panels with other companies or roundtables with other executive sponsors or research papers around disability inclusion. We really did notice that preparing them and having them engage externally really pushes beyond that internal sponsorship and reinforces that responsibility to drive meaningful change. And actually with the support from our external partners such as Purple Space and Valuable 500, we do have those opportunity to assign these types of initiatives to our leaders. So just to conclude, we really had like a top-down, bottom-up approach to accountability. It's working. It's not perfect. Definitely, we're still continuously trying to embed that accountability at every level in the organization.
Thanks for sharing that. I think starting the journey and getting there and having your commitment and accountability embedded in from the start is very important. Before I turn to my right to Ruth and Neil, I'll get back to you, Wolfgang, on any more practices, good practices that you've seen.
So hopefully we do not finish the time, only the two of us. I will try to be quick and wrap it up a bit. Yeah, I think there's some examples that are easy to understand. and make sense, even if the perspective is a bit different. Like one observation we have made is that every organization is different. You cannot say it works in most of the cases or in all the cases the same way. But there are some examples we can give. One is a bit similar to what you said, Iulia. The fact that the company decides to dedicate resources, hopefully full-time or at least very focused, to a disability manager, you name it, accountability, responsible, or other names for that, is a big difference. So if this accountability is there, then the progress will follow. This is a bit different for a global approach. You talked about the global standards and the team of people, and in smaller countries or in countries that start or where these initiatives are starting, it's a bit different. No? You need to fight for every hour that someone can explicitly work on that. And for us, it's a game changer when we see that companies have this focus with their resources on that, so that all the topics come together in one place. Another example, like the example would be then a company of the retail industry, to name Brehuescu. Some of them might know it. They decided to do so, and it's really progressing. On the other hand, maybe just to expand a bit on that, we also had other talks with companies where these resources were being reduced. What happens then? Of course, the priorities and the importance of it, they go down again in the agenda. So I was stunned a couple of months ago when we talked with the HR team that were very committed 5 years or 10 years ago, when they said, how should we put the text in a job advertisement for people with disabilities? How should we communicate? We were like, we explained this to you 5 or 10 years ago. What's wrong here? So this kind of quote that inclusion is a marathon and not a sprint also applies here. So it's a constant work. A second example is best practices, provide best practices and share it. One example is Generali. They participated in a talent program with us in, I think it was Germany, and what they did, they shared the successes, the learnings, maybe also the failures of that program with all the HR leaders worldwide. So they kind of shared experience, even if the countries were not participating. I think it's a very smart way to do it. A third example is train your top management. It's for us a non-brainer, but because if the awareness is there, if the contact with people with disabilities is there, it's a completely different picture. Also give good arguments and backing. What does this mean? I think we should always talk about disability confidence and accessibility as an economic advantage, but this needs to be explained. It's not. Many people do not understand why this should be like that. And for one example here is when you talk about your customer base or about accessibility, I think Neil will talk about it more, to convince your sales staff that the target group becomes bigger, or that you do not miss out many people because you're not accessible, or that your stores are perfectly designed for everyone and the customer service is there for everyone, which makes you more successful. But you need to repeat these messages constantly, I think, and then it works in the whole company. And the last point, it's also a bit similar what you said, Iulia, this bottom-up approach to have networks in place, employee resource groups, or networks where you can be member. Like we run the business disability networks in Austria and Switzerland. Makes a big difference. Though, even us as leaders, when we are left alone and when we can exchange with peers, it makes a huge difference, even if it's only about getting rid of the frustration, or also learn from each other even better. So I think it's also important to have these networks within the company, like many companies already have, or also position yourself as a leader in a certain branch. One example in our case is Bank Austria UniCredit, also a very well-known company and a valuable 500 signee. They are really ambitious and do many things in our country, and then they use this to communicate it to others in their branch and industry. So this is kind of my conclusion in short words.
I mean, thanks for sharing the importance of sharing with others as well and relaying. I think that's something that, Iulia, you mentioned, and because it also gives me a wonderful segue to talk to Ruth and turn to my right there. Ruth, one of the topics that was highlighted, and I mentioned earlier in our white paper, was around storytelling. From your experience, how do you see the impact that authentic storytelling has on people around you, and how it can lead to creating more inclusive workplaces?
Yeah, so I'm sure we all know how it feels in our hearts when we hear a great story. it really, really touches us. And, you know, I believe it's something that we all, you know, have a role as leaders to tell a lot of amazing stories, you know, that happen across our business. And that's a lot to do with, you know, the people that we have in our business, but also, you know, for example, what we do externally with our customers. So, you know, in Bayer, we, again, like Sanofi, we have a huge kind of global business. We have 3 business units. We have a pharmaceutical division, we have a crop science division, and we have a consumer health division. And, you know, we have this platform where we ask a lot of our employees to come along and share their stories, what's important to them, and, you know, the challenges that they're having. And just to give, you know, you a bit of a story, for example, we did a big drive in our business on menopause because, you know, it's a health-orientated business, you know, across our pharmaceutical and our consumer health division. You know, this topic wasn't being talked about 10 years ago. It was a taboo subject. And what we've really done is that we've embraced that. We've embraced it, you know, for our customers. We've created that dialogue, which then I think, you know, brings a very inclusive environment so you can understand the challenges that people are facing, especially women, you know, going through the, you know, that period in their lives. You know, I think also, you know, for me personally, I think it's great that I get to tell my story, but it's also great that people see me, you know, as a business leader first and foremost, and that, you know, ultimately Bayer has fulfilled its commitment, you know, to me, that regardless of the fact that I have a physical disability, you know, I'm able to be on the executive team within the business. And, you know, the story that then I can tell about that, I think it absolutely resonates throughout the business. And I think it's a really, really, really powerful story that we can bring both internally and externally.
Thank you. And you're absolutely right, and that's probably one of the takeaways that people, I hope, will take from what you've just shared, which is you will use Zero Project to make new connections, make new business connections, make new interactions, meet new people, but also get to know the people that are talking to you and exchanging. We all have our own personal history. We all are individuals worthy of getting to know you and exchanging with you. So I think get to know the people, truly know the people you're interacting with. Obviously, when it comes to storytelling, for people to come up and share their story, trust is very essential, and a community and a culture of trust within an organization. Otherwise, typically, we don't see much people willing to come forward and share their stories. Can you tell us how you believe leaders can help build and nurture a culture of trust within their organizations?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think is a lot to do with role modeling. I think as leader, you need to show up, to live all of those examples. I think it's really important for people to see what you've achieved, but I also think it's really, really important that people understand and see the challenges that you have faced as an individual, how you've overcome them. And so we really do encourage people to talk about the failures. You know, I keep saying to my team, I want to see 9 failures, because that 10th one is going to be the one that's going to absolutely change the business and is going to put us onto a growth trajectory. And I want people to talk about all of these, you know, areas that they faced. One of the great things, I think it's a lovely one that we do in Bayer, is we create what we call new leader onboarding. So every time you go into a team, you get a chance to have a conversation with the team about who you are personally. So, you know, what are some of your vulnerabilities? What are some of the things that, you know, you've addressed throughout your life? We get the team to be able to ask us any questions, anything from what kind of coffee do you like in the morning to what food do you like to, what's your philosophy on where the business is going and what are some of the big growth levers we need to be employing. And I think it's a lovely way to try to embrace that feeling of openness. And I know you talked, right at the very start as well about psychological safety. That's another thing that I think is also really, really important, that we create that environment where people feel that they can come and talk very openly. Because again, I say to my team, unless you can tell me and you're open about what the problems are from a business perspective, but also about the problems that you may be facing as well, I can't do anything about it. I can't address it. I can't make a difference. And therefore, I think it's really important that we have that two-way dialogue, that we are really, really, really listening to what people are saying to us, and that we act on that feedback. I think people need to see that you're listening, that you acknowledge it, and then that you make changes and you make differences, and then you provide support networks as well, when there are also other issues that happen with, the big teams that we have in the business.
Thank you for sharing this. And vulnerability. If you are vulnerable, people in turn will feel more comfortable sharing things with you, whether it's their personal story, whether it is about disability or not, or something completely different. And I can see how being open about what's happening in one's life allows people to just be more comfortable in doing their job and doing it well on an everyday. And I think from a business point of view, that's also what business want.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Neil, on your side, so I'll ask you to kind of talk about two topics at the same time. A bit of a challenge there, not for you, but typically just throwing that on. Still on the topic of accountability that we mentioned earlier, but also storytelling. Like, how important do you see it being for organization, and how is Atos approaching those topics together?
Okay, so let's start with the accountability piece. We have various different internal structures that enable us to monitor our progress on accessibility and focus on addressing some of the gaps. So we have a system called our Book of Internal Controls, which we have some accessibility controls in there, and these are things where our internal audit function goes round and checks whether or not the business is actually doing what it's supposed to do. And where we find that the business is not doing what it's supposed to do, they are pushed into putting in place an action plan to be able to fix this. So these are processes that don't just happen for accessibility, these that happen for sustainability, for anti-money laundering, the whole, it runs the gamut of all of the sort of things that we have to do as an organization to stay the right side of the law. So there's that. We then also have an executive steerco. We report on stuff to our board CSR committee. And then we also have various different work streams. So the Accessibility Office, and we're lucky to have an office, and we're a distinct function within the organization, within our general management, and have budget, as to Wolfgang's point. That then has various different areas where we report on a regular basis, and all of these different work streams. Currently we have 68 work streams going on across the business on different topics. So they all report back across different areas. So that's how we start to get the accountability piece. And there are exec sponsors in each of these areas. When it comes to the sort of role model behaviors and the addressing the trust gap that you have for people with disabilities to want to talk about their own lived experience within an organization, because you've done a lot on self-ID within Valuable 500. There are far more people within organizations than actually disclose, and the way that we can help understand that better and become more inclusive is by addressing the trust gap. We've had a number of leaders actually come and talk about their own experience, and I'm going to show a video shortly. But we've also engaged with things like Your Generation Valuable, reverse mentoring initiative, and we actually had our CEO being reverse mentored by one of our disabled colleagues, and that was a really informative experience for the CEO. We've taken that and we then rolled out reverse mentoring programs across the board. We put in place accessibility into our executive leadership programs as well. So we're constantly looking to develop our next generation of leaders, and we have a couple of programs where we're developing our next generation of leaders called Fuel and Gold. Fuel being for the younger employees, and then Gold being the programs for people stepping up into the top management positions. And typically there are 4 topics that the teams have to address in their projects, and one of those 4 topics every single time is disability inclusion and accessibility. So our next generation of top management are having to think about the issues and the topics around disability inclusion as part of their management training and their progression throughout the organization. So it doesn't solve things overnight, but what it does do is start building that culture where your next generation of executives are already aware of this and thinking about how it can benefit the business. And the business benefits because actually accessibility helps us win new business as well. So that's understood, and it's particularly understood by our sales community. And I have a video that I'm going to share. It's from our head of large deals globally. It's a guy called Rick Robarts, and I'm going to read out the captions for anyone that can't see, because the video was actually produced for International Sign Language Day, and there is no sound. So if we're ready to roll the video, that would be great. Hello, my name is Rick Robarts. I work in Atos. I lead the Atos Large Deals team globally. I am hearing. So you may ask why I'm using sign language today. Well, I'm the proud father of a D-deaf daughter. And as a family, we use British Sign Language at home to communicate in a way that we can all understand. Sign language is a visual means of communicating using gestures, facial expression, and body language. There are many sign languages globally, just like spoken languages. However, British Sign Language is different from American Sign Language. Sign language is used mainly by people who are deaf or have hearing impairments, but everybody can learn some signs. Join me today, International Day of Sign Languages, and together, let's raise awareness of the importance of inclusive communication. And then he gives a link on where you can find out more information about International Sign Language Day. So this is one of our top execs within the organization. It's something that he hadn't talked about before, that then went out and was posted all over LinkedIn. So it wasn't just internally, it was to our client base as well. And actually, we found that when we put stuff out on social media and on the external channels, we actually get around 23 times the engagement from our employees than we do from the internal channels. So having this very visible display of allyship and understanding really helped people understand that whilst we are an organization that does a lot of remote work, our top management style doesn't have to be remote. And we can be humane and humans in the way that we address each other, and that really has helped in terms of other execs coming and talking about their own disabilities and their own lived experience. So we now have a fairly significant number of our top leadership that are happy and open talking about their disability, their lived experience, not just within our own organization and within leadership meetings, but out and open and public about it. And that has changed the way that people view disability and accessibility within our organization.
Thanks for sharing that, Neil, and apologies because I'm having a coughing fit, which is not helpful. You mentioned the beauty of helping people talk and share their story and the impact on the client's side as well as internal side. And we've talked today about the importance of the future generation as well. So there's talking about helping people today, helping bring awareness and welcoming. I'm really sorry, my voice is going as well. Really timely. But can you tell us a little, go ahead, dive a little bit deeper on the program that you're building internally? You briefly mentioned it. Can you go in a little bit deeper?
Yeah, certainly. So we've been running it for a few years now, and like with Iulia and Ruth, one of the challenges we have is how do we make this scale? How do we really get into the mindsets of our employees? And so I looked at what did we do well? And one of the things that we, as an organization, have done really well is sustainability. And we're top rated on various different indices. And it got me thinking. And so we talked about treating exclusion like pollution. And when you exclude someone through making an accessible product or you design a service that people can't use, you're not bearing the cost as the organization. It's the individual that's bearing the cost or society that's bearing the cost. You might lose some revenue, but you're not bearing the immediate cost. So it's a negative externality in the same way that carbon emissions are a negative externality. So what we did then was go one step further and look at that process in terms of the various different scopes for decarbonization, because we were going through all of the rigor of looking at the carbon emissions, energy use, resource usage across the business. So we had a framework, and that framework we are able to then apply in a similar way to accessibility. So we're talking, first scope is, direct. What are the things that we're making or have control over? So we can make them accessible, we can improve them, and then it's indirect. So we're looking at the power of our supply chain and making sure that we, through procurement, are going in and renegotiating contracts, making sure that our suppliers know that this is something that we care about. And going back to the executive education piece, we had an executive education provider that didn't believe us when we said that we wanted all of our venues for the executive education to be accessible. They were surprised when we refused to sign the contract. So money talks, and we held them accountable. As a result of that, we then had a ripple effect, because they then appointed someone, an executive responsible for accessibility, and they've stepped up their programs, and now all of their new buildings are designed to be accessible. So as leaders, we can influence other business leaders and start that ripple effect across the ecosystem. So that's the third part of the three scopes, is you're looking at the upstream and downstream impacts of your accessibility or your inclusion program. So we talk about doing the stuff within the ecosystem in our community, which is why we engage with organizations like Valuable 500, the International Labour Organization, the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, World Institute on Disability. I'm going to keep going and going and going, GIZ, etc. So all of my friends in the room. So these are the things that we are doing to really embed accessibility throughout the sort of business as usual processes of the organization, because it's that way that we can make something that is sustainable, and by sustainable this time I mean something that is going to outlast me.
That sounds like a very good ending, something that will outlast all of us, really. And really, that's the theme that we have had today, is you know, passing the baton. I think it's probably still on the drawing board over there. We are coming to the end of our session, and so I'm going to give everybody just about 2 minutes to actually tell us what are your key takeaways around everything we've spoken about today, and what do you really want people to, beyond everything you've already said, what do you want people to actually take home with them?
In my case, it's 2 takeaways and 1 giveaway. First takeaway, I want to come back to this idea of create psychological safety and trust, which I also tried to connect a little bit with find the right leaders who are not the rock stars on the stage. Sorry, Caroline, not only, but also people who listen. And I think this is really crucial that companies try to implement inclusive company cultures that focusing on this. A second takeaway for me is engage the top management. There's also 2 ways to do it, simplifying. One is the interaction, which means providing trainings, providing contact points, keeping up the dialogue, or pushing even C-level people on the stage, which we try to do regularly. So there is a commitment and there is a role model effect and all this. And also trick them with data a little bit. No? So managers love data in general, and now we can measure inclusion. And there is reportings to be done. And I think this is another level of argumentation that could work well. And when speaking about data, I come to the giveaway was announcing we will carry out an event on the 2nd of April when the Global Disability Summit will take place in Berlin, in a great location, in the Allianz Forum, together with Valuable 500, the ILO, GSZ, and many others. And I heartily invite you, all of you, to join us there. Everyone is invited. Please get back to me personally or on the Zero Project app, or even on our website, myAbility.org, where we exactly talk about leadership and data and the huge potential of that. So thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. Iulia?
I will give a continuation of one of your key takeaways. Once you have, your top management, your top leadership engaged and committed, transform that commitment into action. You can have a top-down approach, a bottom-up approach, a really clear mandate with measurable goals, but ultimately it is how you integrate equity, accessibility, and disability inclusion practices into your business governance, procurement, experiences, and ultimately the daily decision-making. You could spend this magnificent 3 days here at this conference and really walk away with all the best practices, everything that needs to be done. Neil just gave you like a 5-minute list of to-dos. I think best practices are clear, but really true impact comes from adaptation and making sure that you adapt these insights based on your unique business context in order to make a sustainable, actionable, and measurable impact long-term.
Thank you, Iulia. Ruth?
So I think mine are the first one, be comfortable with vulnerability. The second one is embrace your successes, but also the challenges that you have in life. And then the third one really is role model those behaviors and role model the storytelling that you can bring to every single person that you touch. I also, by the way, have a request from Jürgen. He asked me very specifically, because I sat beside him at dinner last night, he said, please don't go for lunch after this session, because he's got a really exciting conversation afterwards, and he would really appreciate it. So I promised him, he's doing a big heart in the background, I promised him I would say that.
That's the giveaway for you yourself, exactly. Ruth, or the giveaway to Jürgen and his panel. What about you, Neil?
Well, as the former chair of the ILO GBDN, I ought to also say, you need to put the I into ESG and listen to Jürgen's panel. I think it's really important, clearly, that we have that accountability. We set OKRs, so objectives and key results, based upon the different areas of the business. So if that's the social media marketing team, it's having dashboards that show how many of our posts on our employee advocacy platform had alt text or captions, and being able to identify who the culprits are that are forgetting to do it and going and politely reminding them. If it's for our internal IT, it's looking at the gated processes for introducing new projects and release cycles for those kind of things. So it has to be appropriate by each area of the business. So you want role-based accessibility objectives across the business, because not everybody is going to do the same stuff. So you pitch how you talk about accessibility specifically to make sure that you connect with the different areas of the business that you're addressing.
Thank you, Neil, and thank you everybody for sharing. So we've got a handful of minutes, which means I get a chance to actually rehash what they've just said on their key takeaways, just in case you didn't get a chance to actually write them down. Listen to people around you, listen to the community, listen to your own inner voice, I guess, from a storytelling point of view as well, and trust that inner voice. Engage your top management. And it might not always be easy. We've had examples of companies who are already doing it, and we heard as well from Wolfgang around everybody is somewhere on the journey, and the journey is never finished. There's always something to do and something more we can do. But get started. And if you've had a closed door, I would say, with your top management, try another door. There's always another door. And if there is not a door, break the wall and create that door. Measure your progress. We've heard a few people mentioning measure your progress. Your senior leadership, the senior leadership within companies will ask for those measurements. They will help you measure how you're doing it. If at all, and if you can, disclose them or share them publicly with people, so everybody, you can attract more candidates with disabilities and retain them, so people know what you're doing. Transform your commitment to action. Commitments are essential. Actions are even more so essential. Adapt the best practices to your own company. Yes, you will hear loads of good practices during these 3 days, overall, as you go out to the community, but make sure you actually adapt them to your own, the own specificities of your organizations. Embed everything at design. Make sure that you create, first, I mean, we will pass on to the cost of it if you don't do that, and we probably all know that here. But make sure you actually embed disability, inclusion, and accessibility in everything you do within your business. Whether you're working with a large organization, whether you are a small organization yourself, it starts with you, it starts with the big businesses, but it starts with every one of us embedding this at every stage of our designs. And role model the behaviors you want to see. And I think this goes even beyond disability overall, is be the manager, be the leader you want to have. And I think, thank you for that, Ruth, because it's very important. I think, I won't quote any stats because I don't know them by heart, but there's definitely measures that people leave their jobs because of their managers and their leaders. We all know that. We've all had those managers at some point in our careers. So please do make sure that you role model the leader you want to see. And I'll finish because I love Neil telling us to politely remind people. Polite is important. Sometimes, we might not necessarily want to be so polite at some point, but politely remind people if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And it can be tiring, but we're all here to support one another, and I think that's why conferences like this allow us for moments to share, get enthused, and I hope you'll bring that energy back within each and every one of your organizations. So thank you to our panel and our panelists today, and thank you for all of you for listening. Thank you. And please wait for the ILO panel if you're not leaving. No lunch for anybody, I think.
Can we do selfie? Like, can people put their hands?